Welcome back to the great eight of video game controllers. This is Gaming is in Session. You probably saw the previous one. It was the huge rage of the internet. We went viral, I'm pretty sure, talking about video game controllers and our hot takes on video game controllers. So we're back. We're diving back in. We want to get those views. We want to get those clicks again. So we're going to talk about the surviving controllers of the Sweet 16, the Great Eight. Adam, what do we got on the docket here?
First of all, it's the Elite Eight.
The Great Eight?
It's not oh my gosh. We have one thing. We just follow March Madness. Dude, you can tell he doesn't watch basketball at all. Listen, here's the thing. We got the Elite Eight. 8 controllers we're going to talk about in detail here. We're going to pick which controller is the best, and then we're going to move to the Final Four and Championship in the next video. But right off the bat, Alex, let's start it with the number 7 seed, the PlayStation 1 controller, versus the number 4 seed, the Nintendo Super Scope. So my argument for the PlayStation 1 controller is that I know you say nothing hasn't done anything revolutionary, but for the time, they mentioned in Sony history, the developers, that they worked as long on the controller as they did on the console because they wanted to ensure that it is comfortable, which it is. They use the patented star circle X square. I mean, that is a Sony staple nowadays, very easy to follow, recollect. Again, it's like a national brand at this point. The shoulder buttons are huge, gave more flexibility for developers to actually develop games and come up with different combinations of buttons. It's a good controller. Is it the best? No. Was the one with analog sticks on it better? Yes. But as a controller, I think it suffices. It runs well. Like I said, I played all those wonderful games in my childhood on that controller. So by talking crap about the PlayStation 1 controller, you're talking crap about my childhood. So watch your mouth. And I do want to talk a little bit about the Super Scope. I've got a couple things to mention about it too. And why do you think which one of these is better?
I'm going to approach this from a different angle philosophically. You've made your case with the PlayStation 1 controller, and it's obvious I hate that son of a gun. I mean, it's a better boomerang than it is a controller, if we're being honest. Here's the thing about controllers. What is the purpose of a controller? It's one, to give you control of the game, which all of these do in some capacity. But the other is to help you, break that wall into the land of immersion. And something that the PlayStation 1 controller will never do, but what the Super Scope can do, is make you feel like you're there. You and I are VR enthusiasts. We love PlayStation VR because we feel like we're there. You know what else makes you feel like you're there? When you're playing a Super Scope game and you have the bazooka up on your shoulder and you're closing one eye and you're looking down the scope at the other one. Nothing else is around you except for you and that robot that you're about to blow up. You don't get that with the PlayStation 1 controller. And it's nothing special. It's all the technology of the Super Scope that allows you to get that immersive experience. That's why I think Super Scope should beat the PlayStation 1 controller, because the PlayStation 1 controller is a reject and the Nintendo Super Scope was just simply forgotten.
See, my thing is the Super Scope, first of all, took six batteries and lasted an hour. That is a hefty price tag on top of the Super Scope to pay for this controller that, one, you can't use on modern TVs. You can only use CRT TVs. And I know back in the day it wasn't a big deal, but now people rarely have that. You can't even use it as a controller anymore. And there were a decent amount, not a lot of games for it. So Super Scope 6, which came with the Super Scope. We got Bazooka Blitzkrieg, Lamborghini American Challenge, Terminator 2, Battle Clash, Metal Combat, Falcon's Revenge, The Hunt for Red October, Operation Thunderbolt, Yoshi's Safari somehow, a Tin Star. So there were some interesting games for it, but not a bunch of games. And I don't think it worked that well, even when you did have a CRTV and things of that nature. And this isn't, today's controllers don't make you feel more immersive. How does the Nintendo Joy-Con make you feel immersed in a game? It doesn't. So that shouldn't be the mark of a good controller. Is it an advantage if it does? Absolutely. And I will give it that. But I still think the PlayStation 1 controller, it's not going to win the whole thing. It's kind of a Cinderella story, but I still think it's better than the Super Scope.
I disagree, and we're starting off with a bean. I hate the PlayStation 1 controller. I hate the PlayStation 1 controller. I hate it. It's a bad controller. It's a waste of my time. Eat a bean, Adam.
Okay, I will start with eating a bean. If the bean boozle that I partake of is bad, Alex wins and the Super Scope moves forward. It's another barf. The last video I had one bean to take and it was a barf, and this is another one. The last one was good. There's no way I get two good barfs in a row.
There's no way. There's not that many peach jelly beans in the universe.
It's barf. Oh my.
That means I'm happy because Super Scope wins. It gets the recognition it deserves, and I'm also happy because you're eating a barf. This is great. This is great.
You set up the next.
Yeah, I'll set up the next one. Up next. I'm riding high now. Up next, we got a dream team matchup here. This is the real Cinderella story. Virtual Boy coming up against the revolutionary NES controller. And I think I'll just lead off. Let's describe a little bit more about the Virtual Boy controller. High comfort, 2 D-pads. I mean, you can control with either hand if you want. You know what? Maybe it's the first video game console to cater to left-handed people who might want to move with their right hand and then hit buttons with their left hand. It's a symmetrical controller. Excellent design. Here is the kicker of the Virtual Boy controller. No other video game console is really doing this except for maybe the Wii U in a small capacity. You want to know how awesome the Virtual Boy controller is? The Virtual Boy controller powers the Virtual Boy. That's right. The Virtual Boy is portable by virtue of its controller, wherein you could stick 6 AAA batteries into the Virtual Boy controller, and that's what is powering the entire system. It's excellent. It's beautiful, and it's a necessity to the console. Unlike all these other things where you can just swap them out with any other controller that fits better. NES, there's not much that we got to say about the NES controller. Everybody knows it. Here's what I don't like about the NES controller. It's got those pointy corners, which are probably okay for the time, but now with my man hands, it like hits a very specific vessel on the ball of my hand, and it makes my whole thumb go to sleep. And the Virtual Boy controller does not do that. So Adam, where are you standing on Virtual Boy versus NES?
Dude, I am so out of this world. I didn't listen to a word you said. This barf, it is so bad. Like the whole way down, it just rots everything. Like I feel it in my stomach. It is so disgusting. And I want to disagree with you simply for the fact to make you eat a bean because that was so bad. Virtual Boy, as I mentioned, you did let me play yours. I like the fact that it is very comfortable. It gives you the 2 grips to really hold on to. It was comfortable, especially something in virtual reality. It felt intuitive when you were using it, playing Telltale Boxer or Mario Tennis, something of that nature. And I think a good characteristic of a good controller is that it feels good. It allows you to, as you mentioned last matchup, take control of the game, manipulate it so you feel like your skills versus the computer's, not like you automatically have a handicap. And I feel like that's what the NES controller did. With its simplicity, although I think that in a way is beautiful, I do think it limited you. And it really caused a lot of the games have to rely on horrible platforming and making it artificially difficult, which I know some people absolutely love. I personally didn't. And I have to go back and remind myself that this is Elite 8 of the best controller, not the most nostalgic, not the most culturally relevant, not the one everyone knows the most about. It is what is the best controller. And I have to agree with you that I think the Virtual Boy, with the additional buttons, with the fact it's actually comfortable, and the fact that it does have that kind of neat, it runs the Virtual Boy itself. Batteries aren't great, but it's still it's new, it's kind of cool, it allows it to be portable. So as bad as I hate to, I think I'm gonna, dude, it is so bad. This is, I'm gonna have to agree with you, and I think Virtual Boy does in fact move forward to the final four. So Virtual Boy next, we got the 16 seed Super Nintendo versus number 6 Dreamcast. So what I will say about the Super Nintendo is obviously it's a classic controller. That is where the bread and butter where I grew up playing the Super Nintendo. And I mean, just look at this. It feels great in your hands. It doesn't have the two little drop downs like the Virtual Boy does, but it still feels so right. I have so many controllers I've played nowadays that they don't feel anywhere near this good. The Joy-Cons don't come close to the comfort and the ability to feel like I can manipulate the game and control it as this does. You got the 4 main beautiful buttons. Everyone knows them, very distinguishable, very easy. The R and L, you don't have L1, L2, R1, R2, simple L and R. That's all you need. Start and select right in the front and a very functional D-pad that works exactly as you want and can match your speed without causing any delays. Beautiful controller. Remember, the length of the controller I also feel like should be a factor, and that is perfect on the Super Nintendo. You don't want this huge thing where it's sprawling around when you only have 4 feet from your console to your couch, but this is that perfect middle ground. I didn't measure it, but it's a good length cord, great controller. I'm a big fan. I have a feeling you're going to come out with some knowledge about the Dreamcast, though.
Yeah, I mean, I have nostalgic sympathy for the Dreamcast. I loved playing the Dreamcast. Important thing with the Dreamcast, in an era where you had to choose between Rumble and saving, the Dreamcast gave you just a straight up 2 slots, one for a memory card, one for a Rumble pack. Why they didn't just build the Rumble pack into the controller, I don't know. Oh, I guess you could, for some reason, you could have 2 memory cards if you really wanted to. But there we go. There's a versatility there. There's a possibility for expansion in the controller. There's optimism for what developers might want to add to this in the future. And I can appreciate that. Turns out when the Dreamcast first launched, one of those ports didn't work until there was like a firmware update. So people were just buying Dreamcast without the ability to save, which is hilarious to me. Like, how could you even launch it in that capacity? Another interesting thing about Dreamcast is that I'm pretty sure the controller was designed around one of the launch games, Hydro Thunder, because the controller itself looks and feels like a speedboat, which isn't a bad thing. It's kind of cool. But when I think about SNES versus Dreamcast, and like you mentioned in the last round, Adam, which controller is better? And I'm thinking, all right, you know what? Say I just downloaded an awesome emulator that can play any game with like full speed and clarity and you know, faithfulness. Which controller do I want to set up for all of these emulators? If somebody hands me a Super Nintendo controller, I'm ready to go. I'm happy. I'm going to feel comfortable playing these games. A Dreamcast controller is going to make me think, okay, what's going on here? Is this like some kind of weird controller I get on an airplane when I'm playing the games in the back of the screen? No. SNES controller is an all-time classic. It's got versatility. It's got stability. It can handle the fast button pressing, and you never feel like the controller is not registering your clicks. So I got to go Super Nintendo here.
I'm still that barf.
You're still that barf.
Still that barf, man. So I want you to dive, because you played this more than me. So you mentioned specifically in the Sweet 16 round that like the Dreamcast has a screen that I saw images of how it could be utilized. It had spot for memory cards. We talked about it had like a little recording peripheral to go with Seaman, the game. I like the cord is in a weird spot to where it's coming like toward you.
Oh yeah,
like rather than like naturally like away from you. That's weird. And I do think it's big, kind of ugly. That's not the biggest issue. It's kind of big, but I think the ability to, as you mentioned, adapt to what the developers want to do, I think is something that's very novel. And I think a controller that allows you to do that should be loved and appreciated. So some of the best virtual reality games that like literally my favorite ones are ones where the headset allowed, like for example, Stifled, where there's nothing special about controller, really the game itself, but unlike every other game, the developers were like, hey, there is a a microphone in there? How about we have the people talk and their echoes go out into the world and illuminate it, and that's how you play the game. It's wonderful. And that is a game that I will always remember playing for the first time. One of my favorites in PlayStation and virtual reality. And I think Dreamcast allowed people to play games like Seaman and use that memory card and the little screen. I think that's special to me. And that's why I'm not even joking. I'm not saying this to be a butthole. I really think it's the better controller. I mean, this is it is a great controller, but it limits you. The Dreamcast was revolutionary. And when you have two controllers that are both good, they're both admittedly good, what separates them? That revolutionary, game-changing thought and development. And I think that's what Dreamcast has that the Super Nintendo doesn't.
I got a stinky sock, so we're doing it again.
Another stinky sock. How come I keep getting barfs and you didn't? Next time I want to see it. I want to.
I don't want to do it in the stinky
no,
socks. We'll spin it. We'll spin it.
You take it. No, you take it. I trust you. I'm just.
All right, we got buttered popcorn and rotten egg. You happy? You ruined my night. You ruined my night.
Rotten egg is bad. If it's rotten egg, it's bad. Come on, Dreamcast. Come on, Dreamcast. Oh, he's not.
That's a rotten egg.
Yes. Dreamcast going through, but I knew it. I knew the Dreamcast couldn't lose. I can't believe you didn't pick it. I think, yeah, Dreamcast. I mean, again, I love the Super Nintendo, but it's not the one I love the most. It's the one that's the better controller.
You know, my argument for this SNES controller was falling apart as I was making it because I remembered that I had a Dreamcast with an emulator of like all Super Nintendo games, and I loved playing it with that Dreamcast controller. So yeah, I'm happy for Dreamcast.
Okay, well,
I could have saved myself a bean. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, you did. What a fool. You could have even I argued and you could have said, Adam, you know what? I think you're right. I'm picking Dreamcast. We can sway each other. And instead, you're a stubborn old man and you got a rotten egg because of it. I hope that upsets your stomach like that barf did. Next, we got the N64 versus the Sega Saturn. So now the N64, as I mentioned in the Sweet 16, the biggest complaint I have is that it's really big and it's ugly. Like it's an ugly controller, but it's very comfortable, similar to the Virtual Boy. I don't remember which controller came first, but I feel like there was some.
Yeah,
which one?
N64 came later. Yeah.
Okay, so I think they took the best parts of the Virtual Boy and brought it here. Like it's very comfortable, or it somewhat reminds me of the same. Obviously, you got that Z button. You got the big memory card slot. Again, simplicity, L and R. You don't need all of these 8 different left and right and different triggers, all that crap. Then you got your 2, I don't even know what the heck they call this thing, kind of a directional pad.
The C buttons, they're camera buttons.
Stupid is what that is. I've never used them. But you got your directional pad, just A and B. They got rid of the X, Y, A and B, but they got just the A and B, start, analog stick. Depending on the game you want to play, you're playing 007, boom, rock with the analog stick. Playing Pokemon Puzzle League, you got to go directional pad. Super Mario, back to the analog. The versatility is incredible. It's awesome. It's comfortable. It's ugly. It's big. But really, those are the only bad things I have to say about it. What do you think about the Sega Saturn? And what do you think about the N64 controller?
I think this is a no contest. I don't know how this. I don't know how this happened that Sega Saturn's controller went up against the Nintendo 64 controller. Sega Saturn controller is just like the SNES controller, but with a worse D-pad and with 2 extra face buttons, which makes it too many face buttons for what you're trying to do on a Sega Saturn. The Nintendo 64 controller is, it's designed, I'm pretty sure it was designed for Mario 64, which is like the pinnacle of 3D gaming. It's hard to think of games as better designed than Mario 64 was. The shoulder buttons work well. The C buttons were a new way for people to figure out how to control a camera in 3D space. So they were revolutionary in and of that. The Z button, when you first play GoldenEye and you pull that trigger on the Z button and it feels like a gun trigger, and then you also have the rumble right in front of where your hand is shaking. So it doesn't feel like something's shaking in your palm. It feels like something out there, like a barrel out in front of you. is vibrating when you pull the trigger. So many cool things happen with the N64 controller. Nothing notable happened with the Sega Saturn controller, except for the thing that I'm using as my background, which is like the Sega Saturn 3D controller that was only used on like Nights into Dreams. And I don't even know why, because that game's a 2D game more or less, and you still have these 3D controllers. Doesn't make any sense. But the Nintendo 64 controller does so many things right, and it gets a lot of crap for how ugly it looks, but it works. It works so well. Even if the analog stick will rip the skin right off your thumb, it's a pain that you're willing to endure because it's just working, baby. It's working hard.
That's right. I have to agree. N64 moves forward, and that is the Elite Eight. We now have our Final Four set in the 2022 virtual vintage controller March Madness tournament. So we have the Super Scope versus the Virtual Boy controller versus, and on the other side, Dreamcast versus N64. A very interesting matchup. I would not have planned for those to be in the Final Four, but they are. Thank you for watching. And remember, this is Gaming Court. We are the judges. Our ruling is final, and court is adjourned.